Hello, everybody, and welcome to the UK Paintball podcast. Today, I'm joined by Lucky 15 James Green, also plays for Team GB. Hello.
Hello.
So, what have you been up to in this world of paintball recently, with everything that hasn't been going on?
Very, very little paintball related, obviously. But I started a new job, so that's keeping me busy, and they haven't gotten rid of me yet, which is nice.
Perfect, yeah, of course. Well, got to have a job to play the paintball, so that's what that is. So, moving straight into this then, do you want to tell us about how you got started in the paintball world?
Yeah, I mean, it's the pretty bog standard story that you hear from everyone. Went to a birthday party, loved it. Played at a local site for sort of 4 years, and then just playing sort of local tournaments. Travelled a bit for the CPS, just sort of Slavas League around Europe. That was really fun. Yeah, I played a couple CPPSs, and then sort of I kind of got my teeth really into it when I got into sort of the under-19s, and that's sort of when I realised I could do it quite decently.
Yeah, just out of interest, how easy do you find the jump up just from going from, being a rental player up to kind of playing more potentially walk-ons or playing more sub-air? Was that a big big challenge for you, or?
You're talking 10 years ago now.
Okay.
So that's maybe not too relevant today, but for me, I was quite kind of fortunate. I was playing at sort of a local site that was owned by two guys who played for a team called Havoc, and they were part of a wider paintball club, and they just sort of went, look, you're here every weekend. We can tell you really like it. Why don't you come to one of our training days? And then the sort of classic thing happened when anyone young and remotely quick shows up to paintball. They were like, oh, he'll be a good snake player one day. So they just sort of kept on inviting me back to play the snake. And so it took about a year for me to get from sort of just rental into sort of sup air, and then about another 6 months for me to play an actual tournament.
Okay, so a relatively easy transition for you then. It was
Yeah,
very much a case of you were in the right place at the right time. Yeah,
I was extremely keen, but I was sort of 13. I had no idea how to get into sort of sup air, which I think is a lot better now. Everything's moved off forums and sort of into Facebook, and it's a much easier thing to find. So I was watching the YouTube videos, desperate to play, and then someone gave me a chance. I was like, oh yeah, that's what I've been waiting for ages. So
obviously you mentioned the Team GB, obviously under 19s. That's what we're here pretty much to talk about today. Before we get into that though, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your student involvement. I think the first time I kind of was aware that you were a player was Student Cup days a few years ago now.
Yeah.
That was when I started playing, and that's how I started to kind of get into everything. You were part of the UWE squad. Was that where you were studying, or were you studying elsewhere?
So I was studying at University of Bristol, which is different to University of West England, which is also in Bristol. But again, browsing Facebook, came across it. So like, wow, student paintball's a thing. This is super cool. It'd be great to meet a load of people at university who are into the same kind of thing as I am. And yeah, they've got a great setup. UE do. They've got a reball field, sort of about the size of a basketball court, that they use every Saturday for a couple hours. So it's a great way to sort of introduce people to paintball. You can get them to come along and pay like £2, and they can play paintball every week. So I think it's £1 at the moment they charge.
Okay.
And that kind of shows off what paintball is. And from there, everyone who's gone and played, they call it live paint because it's proper paintball outside. Sure. Everyone has gone and played it, bigs it up so much that when we do run a trip, which we try and do about 4 to 5 times a year, like the attendance is like 90 to 95% of our active members all want to go. So
that's superb.
It's a great channel, and I think we're trying hard as the Student Paintball Network to sort of copy that model almost and put it into other universities as a sort of channel into paintball. But yeah, that's sort of what happened with me at UE.
Yeah, so we're not going to go into this too in depth, but I believe you had
Yeah.
a good chat with Marcello on the Paintball Magazine podcast about this. So if anyone wanted to go back and listen to that, you will find that over on Paintball Magazine's page as well. So getting straight into this then, Team GB, obviously you've been heavily involved in that since you pretty much kind of just started playing. So what does it kind of mean to you to play for Team GB? What do you think as far as the approach they're concerned? Should it change for a lot of people? Should it change an approach, or do you think that it's very much something that people don't really care about so much? I know there's a few questions in there.
Yeah, I was going to say that's like three questions at once. I'll try and answer them piece by piece. But to me, playing for GB is sort of two things. First, it's sort of a recognition of all the hard work that you put in. It took me sort of 6 years to get to a standard when I could play on the under-19s. So to get that sort of seal of approval, you're like, oh right, okay, this is legit. Same with the men's. And secondly, it's kind of a pride thing. I'm sort of very nationally proud of England and Great Britain. My girlfriend's French, so we have that rivalry. I've got to hold on to that dearly. So it's nice to sort of go out on the field, look around, and be like, look, we're here to represent our country and put on a good showing. And there's a bunch of French, Russian, American, Spanish people on the other side of the field, and we can't show them we're chumps, basically.
Sure.
So
yeah.
As for GB's approach, I think the approach hasn't changed drastically over the last few years, but I think it's sort of shifting in terms of just the organization behind it. It's much more clear what's going on. People kind of get it. This year, the tryouts for 2020 were back in December, which is the earliest tryouts I know of. And I think it's sort of really, people are getting really excited about it and getting behind it. And you've got more aspiring players and more established players at the men's tryouts for sure. The under-19s are always strong. The ladies is the same bunch of girls every year, but that's expanding each year. You've got a load of girls coming through the system. Vets just looks pretty strong this year, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I don't think it needs to change. The incremental improvements they're making seem to be paying off.
Yeah, so I was with a friend at the Team G the trials myself last year, and I hadn't been anywhere before that, but just to see the amount of people that were there across both of the days for the veterans and the ladies on Saturday and then the men's on Sunday, I thought that was really something special, because you had a lot of players. Let's just talk about the men's for now, because that was at least where my experience of the day came from. You had players all the way from like some Div 4, Div 5 teams, or at least they were in that position last season, but very much aspiring to do a lot more, and were very much encouraged to come along anyway, not only to try out for the team, but also to learn and develop and get a lot more experience off those that were more experienced.
Yeah, and I mean, the Team GB tryouts, right, and this is true across the board, is it's a very open experience. You don't get frequently. So for starters, you've got people there whose actual goal for the day is to assess you, right? So there's a very precise eye or set of eyes looking over you and looking over every part of your game. So the feedback that you're going to get is really strong. And if you're not satisfied with the feedback, you know who those people are, and if you want more, you can reach out to them directly, and they'll all give it to you. So it's a great way to get better and to find out where your weaknesses are. And then on top of that, it's very rare that a Div kind of 5 player will get to sort of, or even like a Div 3 or a Div 2 player will get to play up against maybe an elite player or a previous GB player in sort of a very competitive environment. It happens sometimes in open training, but this is an environment where they're there to show off what their talent is. And so you're going to really see, if you're a snake guy going up against one of the best back players in the UK, you're going to see how good that laning is. And you're going to go, right, okay, maybe I can't run snake on the break every time, because if I'm playing someone that good, they're just going to shoot me all day long.
I mean, that's quite a big difference, isn't it, between a lot of the divisions? Yes, maybe they're shooting the same lane, but they might not be shooting it in the same kind of way. Obviously, reaction time comes into it, their ability to actually make the shot on the first ball
Yeah.
as well.
Timing on the break is huge. Like, look at Mason on the break. His timing is perfect every time. I'm so jealous of it. He's just always. He is slower than me, but on the break he's probably quicker than me half of the time because I fuck up the timing, and he's just perfect every time on it. So
Sure.
like little things like that, and then on top of that, how frequently as a Div 3, Div 2 player, for example, do you get to play with one of the best players in the country, you know, and they're actively on the field and you can hear their communication, you can see what they're trying to do to win the point, you can see when they're pushing, why they're relaxing, and they'll be happy to explain all that stuff to you because you've been assigned to the team with that guy for the day. And vice versa, how frequently do you get to go out and help your other divisional players? Like if you're the Div 2 guy and you're on a team with a Div 5 player and they ask you for some help, they're still looking up to you, even though you're not necessarily one of the best players on the day. You might be, and you just happen to play Div 2, divisions aren't everything. But it's a very open experience, and I quite like that. It's a chance for people to sort of help each other out and really see sort of what the level is at the top in the UK in a competitive way.
Yeah, and for those that don't know more detail, what you did was everyone was numbered up, so it wasn't a case of, oh, so and so plays for that team, you're going to go over there.
Yeah,
everyone was given a random
semi-positionally.
number.
It was done
Okay,
semi-positionally,
right.
so you wouldn't have 4 snake players on the team because obviously
Sure.
snake players want to go and show off that they can play a snake. But
yeah, everyone had their preferred positions and things, and that's what they were there, like you say, to show off and show off what they could do and learn from others as well. And again, even in those areas, it was a kind of a really nice balanced mix. There were some good points played as well. Everyone certainly trying their best. There was no one there kind of just to have a laugh, at least from those that I was talking to. Everyone was there to take it seriously.
It was a really strong tryout, really strong. And there's players that didn't make the list that when you ask someone, you know, who do you think the best player in the UK is, would be on that person's list. So like someone like Stoney, for example, this year didn't quite make the cut for GB.
Right.
And when you have that, who's the best in the UK conversation, Stoney is one of those guys that's frequently brought up. And that's how competitive it was at the top end. There was such a concentration of talent up there that the squad looks really strong this year. That's for the men's, but I think that's also true across the other 4 or the other 3.
As far as I'm aware, I mean, like, hopefully you can shed some more light on this. Last year, there were some interesting comments concerning like who was on that team to begin with. A lot of people very much saying like kind of what's happened this year, that the majority of the best players in the country play for the Luckies. That seems to be certainly reflected quite considerably. I know that decision wouldn't have come directly from those comments, but it was more a case of, right, okay, now if there's going to be the representation here for us, then we need to be able to put the best team forward. Currently, both Lucky 15 squads are dominating as far as the elite division is concerned, so it makes sense to a lot of people to kind of put that squad out there. From your perspective, do you think that's the best approach as well, or do you think it's much better like you had last year, where you had a mix from the guys from like Wart, you had the Jags in there as well, yourself? It was like a good mix of good players. So is it very much a case
I wouldn't
of
say
this
it
is
was
why the trials are?
I wouldn't say it was a good mix because
okay,
5 of the 7 players last year came from 2 teams. So that's, you know, 4 teams are in the mix, which is true this year. But I get what you're saying. Is last year there was a bit more variety, and it was a little bit more of an unexpected team that came out, and I think that was just due to the nature of what was going on with the NXL and all of that. A lot of the teams weren't out there playing pro that would maybe have been otherwise, and perhaps would have been a bit more convenient. And personally, my philosophy on the tryouts is you always take the best players there, regardless of the politics. And I do think that that's what's happened in every GB tryout that I've been to, which is, God, what, 7 maybe now?
Okay.
This is more, so, you know, that's a fairly decent amount of experience. But you can't help it if 7 of those players all happen to play for the same team. Do you know what I
Uh,
mean? Like,
yeah, that absolutely helps with chemistry as well. As we know, paintball
mm,
paintball teams
yeah,
have to have good chemistry to be successful. So it would absolutely make sense in my mind for the majority of that squad to be made up from players from that team. So yeah, sorry, carry on.
yeah. Well, it's exactly the same point. You know, you pick the squad that you think as a selection committee is going to be the best out there and is going to represent Great Britain the best. And you know, if you have a really good representation one year, it means you have a better chance at outside sponsorship. It's also just nice for the players because, you know, if you're one of those top 3 players in the country and then you're playing with players that aren't necessarily the same tier of you, let's say,
Mhm.
then it might disincentivize other players next year to come to the tryouts. If they go, that I don't think that the best team selected each year, why would I go?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the fact that there's complete transparency in the whole process and people can trust that it really is the best 7. I think they've got 9 men going out this year. The
Mhm.
best 9 that get picked. And that really is crucial for the whole longevity of the situation because otherwise the people aren't going to take it seriously and they're not going to want to try out if it's just seen as sort of a mates club or a politics session.
Yeah. No, of course. And it definitely. I don't see everything being marketed in the way it is. I definitely don't think it's a case of, oh, we're just picking them for the sake of like it being on paper. If everyone's turning up and everyone's performing, which on the day, or at least of the guys I know on this list, you watch them and you know that they're kind of outperforming other people. So maybe it's not a kind of always fair to some people, but I think it's very much a case of if we're
Yeah.
trying out and we want to be competitive on these circuits, then
It's
we need to put the best people out there,
yeah.
and it's as
Yeah.
simple as that.
It's not about being fair. It's about giving everyone a fair chance
Yep.
and a fair look. But at the end of the day, you don't give someone a spot because I don't know, maybe they've put the work in over the year. You give them the spot because they deserve it. And I
Sure.
think in this case, in this instance, this year, it's bang on the money across the board. I think everyone who's been picked across all 4 teams deserves to be picked, and there's clear reasons as to why in all of those cases. So
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think GB is doing really well on that front with
Yeah.
just the tryouts.
Hmm. As far as competition is concerned, then let's kind of rewind this back to Prague last year.
Yeah.
You guys, what was your opinion kind of coming out of that event from your perspective?
I was actually pleasantly surprised with how he did. I don't think we underperformed by any stretch of the imagination. And I think, to be honest, and this was probably the biggest advantage of the squad that we had last year was that it was everyone but mine. I think I'm right in saying first GB experience
Okay.
for the men's, and so the level of enthusiasm there was massive. We had some really good training sessions, and you know that really helped the preparation for the event. It meant when Jim sort of took over the coaching role when we got out there in Prague, we had a good idea of what was going on.
Hmm.
Obviously, Jim and I have a very similar paintball wavelength because we play on the same team, and so I think we were really well prepared. I think that showed in our first game against Norway, which is basically just blast.
Sure.
We took an early lead,
Lovely.
and then we just got finessed by a proper pro team that
Okay.
they realised what we were doing well. They shot the right lanes on the break when they adjusted, and then after that they made sure they won their gunfights. They chose the right zones, and they were just really clinical about what they did. And fair play, they just beat us. But I was really happy with how we started in that game. We
Okay.
went up two quick points. We got a penalty in the third point, so it was a no point. It was a really good game. The who did we play after that?
I can't remember the game
Italy?
following. You had
No, it
played
wasn't
Italy.
Italy.
Italy was definitely a team you played.
Oh, it was Italy then, because Spain was our last game. Yeah,
Yep.
the
Okay.
Italy game was great. Everyone was rolling on that front. We smashed it. We pushed them down the snake, down the bags, and so we went into the Spain game as sort of a chance to go through to Sunday, which truthfully, just on the level of experience of the squad having played for GB, I wasn't expecting.
Okay.
Which I don't think is unfair to say. You know, when the number of GB caps across 7 people is 8.
Okay.
So, because it was only my second year playing for the men's as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, I was really excited for that Spain game, and it was really close. I think it was 3-3, and
Yeah.
they were started with 4, and we basically had a 5-on-4 to win the tournament, and not to win the tournament, to go through to Sunday, and we lost the point. So you know, it came down to that one point. We had the advantage, and fair play to Spain, they beat us.
Yeah.
In a pretty tough game.
Do you think, like, without kind of creating excuses here, obviously you've said that you still think you performed well. It was a good game. At this point as well, it was very low light. Obviously, with me filming you guys as well, it got to the point where even on the camera, I had to say, look, I actually can't get anything now. So how you guys were playing paintball in those conditions was kind of surprising to me. Was that kind of different? Was that a different experience, considering obviously back home we're always playing in the light, maybe a bit darker because it's raining all the time? But
I don't know so much. I think that would be a pretty weak excuse, to be honest, because at the end of the day, Spain were playing the same. You know, we were all playing in the same environment. So I don't really think that was a factor. It was certainly harder to see some of the paintballs coming in on you, and that caught me out. But it's the same for everyone. I'm sure we got some blind shots that they just didn't see come in.
Okay.
So no, I think they beat us, to be honest. And I think, you know, it was a really pretty difficult game, and I'm pretty proud of how everyone played out at GB.
So I think it was safe to say, at least from the vibe that I was getting hanging around, was that everyone was kind of disappointed. I think that was very obvious, but at the same time, there was a very strong team spirit in there, in the fact that, you know, you're all very supportive of one another as well. When people weren't playing well as well, there was kind of like, everyone was like, right, if I'm not playing well, then I'm not going to play. I'm prepared to sit, and then hopefully someone else can kind of get in there and get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, everyone made the sacrifices. I mean, Tommy's normally a snake player, right? And Tommy played the whole tournament sort of behind me, bar 1 point, and, you know, playing the 2 on the snake side, and at one point he got his point in the snake, but, you know, everyone made those sacrifices. So it was actually a really fun experience. It was a really refreshing paintball experience as well, because obviously I played for the same team now for, I don't even know how many years. How many was it? 5 years now.
Okay.
So we're playing with pretty much the same group of people for 5 years. So it's sometimes quite nice to go out and play with some different people.
Yeah, very refreshing.
Yeah,
fantastic. So coming away from all of that, then, what would you say is kind of in the future for Team GB regarding the men's side? Like, with everything going on this year, I think it's difficult to say when and where it's going to happen. But as far as expectations are concerned,
with the squad we've got now, I'd like to see us at least top 4. And I don't think that's a difficult thing to achieve. Last year we came sort of like, I think we came 11th, which maybe isn't our best showing. I've got it written down somewhere.
Yeah.
But the years before that, we were 5th and 5th. So my definition of success there, I think, would be to get out of the quarterfinals, get into a semi-final game, and then from there, I think anything's gravy. If we get a podium as men's, I think that's a take notice moment. But I don't think it's unfeasible to say we could be a top 4 nation.
And I think in both of those 5th place instances, the quarterfinal game or semi-final game was always the Americans, correct?
It was America and Russia.
Russia.
I played in the American game, and we literally got 5th, because every single quarterfinal game was 4-0 except for ours, because Dickey made a crazy move down the backside and just won a point for us.
Right.
So we lost 4-1. So we got 5th. Sometimes that's what it comes down to. And the Russia game, I remember being in the pits for. I didn't play for GB that year, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty close, and I'm pretty sure everyone was pretty tense watching.
Sure.
So maybe,
even
disappearing
in that instance,
paintballs on some Russians. I'm not going to say anything else there.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, even in that instance, you know, the Americans and the Russians are some of the best paintballers on the planet. So if we're kind of at least coming close and winning the points, then I think it just shows that there is a lot of potential in a British team being
Yeah.
very highly competitive again, and there's no reason why it can't be done. And I think it's
Mm.
a good thing to say that if everyone, I'm not saying that everyone doesn't put effort into it, but if everyone kind of got behind the team in the same way that we would for a football match or the same way that we would for a rugby tournament, etc., then there's absolutely no reason why it can be done.
Yeah.
So
So I agree. Top 4. That's where I want us to be.
yeah.
So that's just me.
As I'm pretty sure everyone on that squad has at least got the same mindset as you. No one wants to step out onto a
Yeah.
paintball field, especially when you're traveling and lose every single game.
No, those are the worst weekends, and they're always filled with loads of arguments as well.
Absolutely. And whilst it might not be what everyone's used to, representing GB national, it is a national tournament, or international, I should say. There's nothing that can be taken away from that. It's a big deal, and I think even though people kind of say, "Oh, well, it's not the pinnacle of our sport," it should absolutely be considered as not being far away from it, because all of those squads are still putting very good teams in.
I do think it is the pinnacle of our sport, to be honest, because if you look at it, I think there's many different.
So I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying that some people
I think
view.
there's a couple different pinnacles, but at the end of the day, it's a huge achievement because you've still got to go through. The French have some of the best players in the world. Just look at the Tauntauns last year dominating semi-pro in America.
Sure.
You've got the Russians in there; they're always ridiculous. You've got the Americans. I just don't think you even need to discuss how ridiculous the American sort of
it's a very
the player base
roster.
you've got. You could pick probably half of the teams in NXL Pro and put together a pretty strong USA roster from it. So yeah, I think if you get through those teams and those kind of players and like there's the other countries aren't scrubs. Like look at where Blast started coming.
Sure.
Towards the end of last season, beating Golden State Kings, they had a little bit of help, but still, it's a team effort. Like if you get through all of those teams and you win, like that's huge. That's such a big achievement. So
yeah, as far as achievements are concerned, then this is certainly something that will help Team GB expand the kind of the interest and the reach towards external people as well, as in those that aren't as involved in paintballers as the rest of us are, as well as companies to help support the trip financially as well, or the events and the training financially. So can you enlighten us a little bit more about that stuff as well?
I mean, from a player's perspective, obviously,
Sure.
but in my perspective, GB is the most marketable tool that English paintball has to attract outside sponsorship. If you pick a team, Jags, let's say Jags for example, Jags is a really widely followed team in the UK. If you go to an outside company and say that we're Jaguars paintball team, it's going to take you a lot of explaining for them to kind of get who you are and what your goals are and how you function. If you go to them and say, "Oh, we're Team GB Paintball," they instantly know who Team GB are. It's a brand name that companies trust and people trust. And so, to be honest, I think and if you can show that not only are you Team GB Paintball, you're organised, you're marketable, and like you are one of the better nations in the world, that companies are gonna. I'm not gonna say they'll be likely to, but I think they'll be more likely to buy into that than any other sort of paintball team that we have. Maybe like leagues are the way to push it forward with sort of live streaming, but I think GB's really, really up there.
Well, it's far more kind of, like you say, easier to market to those that haven't got a brilliant knowledge of paintball, and I think that's something that we can definitely do better.
My parents did not come and watch me play a single paintball tournament for about 4 years, and then I said, "Oh, I'm playing for Team GB," and suddenly in England, suddenly my entire family was coming to the stand. My sister being like, "Oh, how does it work?" Like, Olivia, I played paintball for at this point 8 years. Like, you should kind of like, this is kind of pretty much the only thing I do in my free time. Like, so it's much easier, I think, for people outside of it to buy into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as like the overall tournament's concerned, this was just like a discussion that I kind of had with everyone that tries to come on and when we're talking about international paintball. But as far as a tool to kind of get people in and watching more so to the extent that we make it more of a spectator sport. Yes, it's
Mm.
working on the level that you've just described, as in family members are coming, which is a start. But as far as marketing our regular tournaments are concerned, do you think it's easier to do that with countries, or is that potentially easier to do with the leagues, even though
Yeah.
it's just a different name on the front?
Again, I think it's much easier to do at Team GB. If you put up, say we're hosting it in a park that's in a fairly well in a place with significant footfall, so people are walking to it, and you put up national paintball tournament, so like national X-Ball League tournament happening 2 weekends, come through and see the best paintball players in the world battle it out. You're gonna go, all right, fair, maybe. And my perspective, if you saw paintball world championships and had a list of all the different countries that are going to be there, like people are going to buy into that straight away because they recognize the countries. And so if you Dynasty are probably the most well-known paintball team ever, maybe Ironman. If I went to some random person on the street and said, oh, do you know who San Diego Dynasty are? They're going to say no. If I say, you know who Team GB are? They're going to say yes. I'm like, do you know you have a paintball team? They might be interested. You might engage them. So I think like it's the nation side of it is so much more marketable because people recognize it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more with that one. I say it was certainly a point of discussion. I put out a post a few weeks ago as well, just saying like, would people be more interested in more international tournaments, or is it a case of should we potentially bring it down from less? I think you may have commented or made a comment to me saying that it should potentially be less than what we already have, as in do it.
I saw the conversation. I saw Tommy comment and Tommy Webb. And I pretty much agree with what he said. And obviously it was a while ago, so I might be misquoting him. But I think one is perfect. You know, if you oversaturate it, it makes it a little bit less special. And at the end of the day, people have their club commitments, and you're asking people to book. The way it's done at the moment is probably the most efficient way it can be done, which is tagged onto an NXL event. Sure. I'm not convinced that that's the future, but I'm a firm believer that one a year is fine. I think that's the perfect number. You generate some buzz about it. It's like, oh, it's the World Cup. It's not, oh, it's the World Cup leg 1. It's the World Cup leg 2. The World Cup leg 3. Do you know what I mean? So I think where it is at the moment is the right idea. I'd like to see it move away from mercy into race. Sorry, away from race and into mercy that we've got now, just so it's consistent. Absolutely. But I think the big picture is right at the moment, and can improvements be made to it? Certainly, but they're far too small to they're not far too small. The improvements that can be made, I think, aren't going to fundamentally change the landscape of international paintball anytime soon. I don't think. I think it's it's smaller things, like maybe make it its own event.
Yeah.
You know,
is the future in that?
Do you have qualifying events? So you have, you know, you have Europe as a region do something, then you have America as a region do something. So North America and South America, you have Asia do something, and then you have an actual World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, like this kind of leads nicely into kind of the next section, which I wanted to briefly touch on before we finished. But with the conferencing, in the sense of, oh, so and so many players can only play in Europe, so and so many players can only play in the States, as far as the kind of the higher levels are concerned. So doing something similar with the national teams, like you just said, is that potentially a good idea, or is that too much in a short space of time?
The reason I like the conferencing is more of a logistical thing. At the moment, it's for the nation side of it. At the moment, the tournament side of it is in Europe. There is an Asia World Cup as well, but so it means, at least for our little pocket of it, that it's really Europe centric. You know, there's some teams that come from beyond. So there was Singapore this year, for example. You obviously have America, or USA, I should say, but you know, predominantly European focused. So I kind of like the idea because I think it's a bit more inclusive. Then you can have a Mexico, you can have a Canada in there. Although Canada did bring an under-19 team this year, And it's, then if you don't make top 4, it's less of a financial commitment. But I think really before any of that can happen, there needs to be more money available, because then you're asking people to travel to 2 tournaments a year instead of 1.
On top of
So,
everything else that's going
on top
on
of all their club level commitments. So, it's a balancing act, and that sort of idea, I think, is a long run perspective, and I'm sure that people at the World Paintball Federation, World Paintball Federation, have thought of all of this stuff before, and have got a lot of good ideas on the go. As for the players side of it, with sort of the NXL, I've got mixed minds about that one. I think there's certainly pros to it, and I think there's some cons to it as well.
Sure.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's all right. No worries. Okay then. So, like I said, just before we go, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about as far as GB was concerned? Was there anything else that you wanted to cover?
Probably just a congrats to the team that did well last year. So the under-19s obviously did well as usual, and picked up a 3rd.
Well, the year before they won it. Correct me if I'm wrong, or was that year before?
I think the year before they had a bit of a dip, but they won it the year before that.
Okay.
I think it's been pretty consistent podiuming for at least the last 6 years. I think there's only been one where they sort of missed out. And then to the ladies in the 3-man, they did really well. They came 2nd. So, congrats to those guys. And honestly, to the wider paintball community, the more you guys get behind GB, I think the more it benefits everyone in the long run. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so everyone is aware, the podcast that we're in the process of recording at the moment, this is with the help of yourself, James. We're having a bit of a series of special Team GB kind of coverage. So we're going to get some of the guys from the under-19s involved. We're going to get a couple of the ladies involved as well as the vets. And then we're going to get like a nice little series going. So for those that want to know more about the Team GB aspect, and maybe potentially want to ask any questions or put any ideas forward as far as conversation topics are concerned, then please send me a message, and I'll be sure to get that in there. So.
And on that note, not to step on your toes,
no, please
obviously
do.
This has been very men's focused.
Yep.
So as we get other guests from different teams, I'm sure you'll get the different perspectives from each of the different teams, and you'll be able to, if you wanted to hear more specifically about the under-19s or the ladies, you won't be missing out. They're coming.
Absolutely. So before we call this, then, like I said, I don't know how many times now, so I do not structure these in the best way, but I wanted to get your take on kind of the pro NXL Europe from the Lucky 15 side of things. Are you part of that pro squad? I'd be very surprised if you're not.
I think I am.
Yeah. Okay. A bit of a turnaround.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can comment from the whole squad, but we are planning on playing pro this year, obviously. Planning on playing DPL again. So that's kind of how our season's shaping up. DPL last year was a treat. The standard out there is unreal. It really made us so much better and crisper, and that showed at the CPPS. As for how the NXL is going to go, I think we're pretty excited. There's a lot of fresh European blood in there, so it'd be nice to see where we stand amongst some of those guys. See how we do against some of the established teams. We played against some of them before, sort of DPL and semi-pro. So,
yeah, as far as Breakout and those kind of teams are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, we love playing against Breakout. That's a really fun game like that.
Well, it was very much a horse race between yourselves and Breakout, right? As far as I recall.
In DPL, in DPL, I wouldn't really call it.
I don't know enough of this. Yeah, so I know there are other teams in there.
I think Breakout were pretty much ahead of the pack, and it was a battle between us and a team called RMG Bratislava, which had Malloy playing for them, so they weren't a joke.
Okay.
As to second and third, and we actually had to play them at the last round, and we really almost messed it up. They were up 3-2, and there was like 10 seconds left, and we just ran at them, and this was at the end of quite a long point as well, and they got a major. So luckily we got the tie, and that sort of set us to have that second place. So yeah,
Well, I
but
mean, like considering the kind of quality of maybe so much the teams. I mean, like you were saying, there are big names intertwined with some of these teams that
oh yeah, yeah.
perhaps
So
us
in
Brits wouldn't have
DPL,
heard of.
you've got Breakout at the top of the pack. Then we came second. RMG with Malloy came third, and then you've got Hurricanes in there, and you've got, so they're an established pro team.
Yeah.
They've made a couple Sundays. You've got coming at you that used to be a pro team.
Mm-hmm.
You've got some semi-pro teams in there. The DPL is really competitive, and that's 12. That's only 12 teams in their top division. So there is not an easy game, and like we actually didn't beat the last place team at all in the season. We drew every game we had with them.
Yeah.
So it's close, and we only lost one game all year to Breakout, and we came second still because we drew more games than Breakout did.
Sure.
So it's insanely competitive. It's really close at the top.
Would you say it's improved or brought any more to your mental side of things, as in how you approach on what are on paper tougher games? Or does it help you to understand more that just because they're not the best team on paper doesn't mean that they're going to pose a threat?
I think I've got a pretty healthy attitude when it comes to tough games. I think, my job is pretty simple, which I'm not really competing against anyone in my job. If it's close enough, I run to the snake, and if it's not close enough, I dive into a spot and I wait for them to get lazy, and then I dive into the snake. It's pretty much, okay. And at the end of the day, I can only be responsible for my job. So long as I'm making contributions and I feel like my contributions are helping us win, I'm pretty happy. It's obviously a team game, but my kind of perspective is like, look, you worry about your job, do your job. If everyone does their job, the game plan will come together and it will be a team game. And if I don't think I can get something done, I think I just speak up and say, I'm not going to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So that really helps when you come play tough games. You just go, what things are expected of me? And then I'm not going to do anything else. And if for example, I can't get in the snake, well, it's better for me to be alive than dead. Yep. So I'll just live. And then eventually, especially in M500, they'll either get lazy or they'll get undisciplined, or one of my back players will help me, and we'll get in the snake eventually, and we'll shoot some people. So
yeah, that's what we want to do. So finally, then, what is there anything other than just the fact of you're playing pro? Is there anything that's really going to appeal from being in that position this year at the NXL? Do you think
on a personal level,
yeah.
It's obviously been a huge goal, and I think pretty much all of us. Jim is the only one of us who has pro experience, and obviously we're going to lean on that a lot when we play in pro, because he can tell us that's not going to fly. You're playing against pros now.
Yeah,
I know that because it didn't fly when I played against pros last time. Okay,
yeah,
right.
Sure.
So on a personal level, I think we're just a little excited. I think we know we need to work hard, and we know the level's going to be higher. And I think the real thing comes on a team level. It's sort of, again, going back to that marketability point, it makes us, from a sponsorship point of view, more marketable. And, that's kind of the goal of the team. The Lucky 15s in the last few years has been run to be a pro team, has collected talent to be a pro team, has nurtured the Mustangs to create pro players. And this has been the 15's mission for a while now. So we just it's now on to mission 2, which is to go and win it.
Absolutely. Step 1 complete, on to the next part. Well,
yeah.
There we go. I think that's a perfect sentiment to close off on. So thank you very much for your time, James.
Thanks,
it's been a real pleasure, and it's good to know a lot more about Team GB as well, at least from your perspective. Even though we've had brief conversations in the past, we've never really kind of chatted in depth about it, and this is safe to say is the first time that we have done. So I'm hoping that everyone who has been listening has found it as useful or as insightful as I have as well, because I for one know that I'll probably never be in that position. Maybe one day, but
never say never.
At least in the short term.
They are open tryouts.
Yeah, true. Yeah, maybe next time. So no, it's been a real pleasure, mate, and I think there's very few people who would kind of not disagree but wouldn't go against, or wouldn't be prepared to say that you didn't know what you were talking about with it all. So it's been brilliant.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks for listening, everybody.